I hope you like it.
Phil, are we ready? Are you on?
Yes.
So, okay, so.
Okay, well, this evening, let me... Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. This evening, our budget presentation will include those aspects of the budget that relate to the Public Works Department, including facilities, operations, and some of the other activities in town. John Lawler, our Director of Public Works, will lead the discussion, and his really assistants, Chris Greenlaw in facilities and Dan Carter in operations, will be available to answer questions if they occur.
Good evening, everyone. I handed out earlier hard copies of the core functions for the department. I believe I've gotten everyone. If I miss somebody, please just let me know and I'll pass down a set. Good evening. I'm John Lawler. I'm the honor to serve as the Director in Public Works and Facilities here for the town of Bloomfield. As the town manager mentioned, here with me this evening are Chris Greenlaw, Assistant Director and Facilities Manager, and off camera, working the projector, is Dan Carter, our Operations Manager. I'm pleased to submit the Public Works operating budget for fiscal year 2018-19. I wanted to just emphasize that the proposed budget assumes no new programs and no changes to the number of full-time personnel over last year. While the proposed budget does show an increase over last year, prudent fiscal management and operational improvements have allowed for the absorption of some of the material cost increases anticipated, and you'll see that highlighted a little bit later in the presentation. This is the agenda for this evening. I'm going to briefly touch on the department structure to just give a broad overview, talk about responsibilities and metrics for all aspects of the department. Then I'll get into a short discussion on budget comparison and different programs, identify goals and challenges. Then we can go through the operating budget, and then if you'd like to, time permitting, we can do line by line on the capital budget projects. And then I'll cover issues and concerns and then address any questions that haven't already been answered. I'll start with the acknowledging the mission statement for the Public Works Department. The department's mission statement explains the reasons for its existence. It clearly and succinctly identifies what the department does, why it does it, and for whom. The mission statement informs the public, other governmental entities, and department personnel on the unique purposes promoted and served by the department. And simply stated, the mission of the Public Works Department is to provide quality operations and maintenance services to the town. The department has worked hard and has recently achieved national accreditation. This is a recognition of the organization and management of the department as compared to national industry standards. Bloomfield Public Works is the only accredited public works agency in Connecticut and only the third in all of New England. 5 of our business practices have been adopted as national model practices and are offered to similar agencies across America for how to perform their responsibilities, something we're all very proud of. The Bloomfield Public Works Department is comprised of 4 general areas: administration, field operations, fleet operations, and facility operations. The administration is staffed by the director and key administrative support personnel. My role is to provide mid- and long-range operational and strategic planning for the department. This also includes overseeing capital and operating budgets, applicable grant management, emergency and consequence management operations, fleet purchases, and all personnel matters. Field operations is the manpower component of the department and consists of approximately 20 maintainers, equipment operators, crew leaders, and foremen. The primary activity for field operations is the maintenance of public roads and open space. This includes road repairs, plowing, sweeping, paving, and line striping management, sign replacement, and the mowing of sports fields and open space areas. Fleet operations is responsible for the maintenance and management and repair of approximately 300 pieces of municipal rolling stock valued at approximately $4 million. Some repairs are subcontracted out under a pay-for-service program. This includes repairs to equipment operated by the volunteer fire departments, the Board of Education, BVA, as well as regional emergency service assets. And then finally, facilities. Facilities operations are responsible for daily and capital maintenance and repair of select municipal buildings. This includes oversight of contract management firms and various trade contractors used for the purpose of facilities management and maintenance. This includes active preventative maintenance programs intended to keep select facilities fully functional throughout all of the building systems. Custodial services are accomplished through the Public Works facilities operation personnel. This is our wire diagram. The Public Works Department, as I stated earlier, consists of 35 employee positions across 4 divisional areas. No new positions are proposed in this budget. A part-time analyst position was removed in an effort to meet anticipated cost reductions, and I'll speak to that a little bit more later. These are identified some responsibilities and metrics for the Facilities Department. The Facilities maintains the 7 municipal buildings that are not related to the Board of Education. That includes this building, Town Hall, the 2 libraries, the Human Service Building, Public Works, the BVA, as well as the Police Department, totaling over 200,000 square feet. And you see down on the bottom of the slide the annual utility usages for electric, water, and natural gas in units of measure, and we'll talk about those a little bit later as they relate to the budget line item. These are the responsibilities and metrics for the field operations. We maintain over 1,600 acres of open space, over 2,200 streetlights as part of our program with Eversource, 110 miles of road, nearly 3,000 regulatory road signs. And as I stated earlier, on the right-hand side, you'll see the fleet of over 300 vehicles. On the bottom of the right, you see, I mentioned some other statistics, annual snowfall. I just wanted to point out, we're hopefully, fingers crossed, coming out of winter here. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a summation. We have had above average winter this year, both in the number of storms. We've recorded over 20 individual events that we've had to respond to. That's above the average of 12 to 15 a year that we normally get. Additionally, we've had over 50 inches of accumulation, which is over the 40 to 42 inches that we normally get. And additionally, we've used over 2,000 tons of anti-icing and de-icing, both treated and untreated material this year. We had budgeted for approximately 1,500 tons, so we've already exceeded that, and we've utilized not only that, but the material we had at the beginning of the season that was already warehoused in the building. Our building, just so you know, is not able to contain enough material for the entire year, so we can only contain X number of storms. So we always have to replenish that in such a way that we make sure we can stay ahead of it. Anecdotally, the material goes out 15 times faster than it comes in because we have 15 primary trucks to get loaded and go out. when the storm is over and the salt supplier comes in, they come in one truck at a time. So it is, it's a bit of a science to make sure that we stay ahead of the forecast and make sure that we, not only forecasting in the weather, but forecasting of materials, supplies, and deliveries. So it's fortunately, we're here at the end of March, and hopefully we won't have to be struggling with it weather-wise too much longer. The budget I'm proposing for fiscal year 18-19 is $5.1 million. This represents a 3.2% increase over the previous 17-18 budget year. This includes a contractual salary increase of 2.5%, which is approximately 2.5% of the budget, coincidentally. In order to assume this payroll increase and other increases, reductions were made across the budget, and I'll talk more about these savings a little bit later in the presentation. So this chart is in your town manager provided budget packet, and you may recognize it. It reflects the overall town budget. So what I've done is I've circled the two areas that we're primarily focusing on tonight, those areas being public works and facilities. If you break those two slices of pie down into how our programs roll out, it looks more like this. And it divides into these major categories. So I'll start at the top of the chart, that light green area at the 12 to 3 o'clock. That is solid waste collection, which is the largest area of cost and effort. It's covered under fixed cost. This includes curbside collection and collection of municipal solid waste and recycling at all the municipal buildings, to include the Board of Education. And I'll try to be clear when the Board of Ed is included in our operation and when it isn't, because it does fluctuate back and forth. In this particular case, for solid waste management, it is part of something that we manage. The next section on the chart, lower right-hand corner, that slightly darker green, that's operations roads. That includes road restoration and maintenance. Primarily, that's the paving program. The next area, the next most concentrated area percentage-wise is in yellow. That's operations grounds. That represents about 14% of our program usage. That includes field and sport maintenance, pruning, mowing, et cetera, things like that. It also includes Board of Education grounds. So while we don't maintain their buildings, we do maintain their grounds for them.
I think if I could interject, John, I think the council needs to be aware of this. You're going to encounter sections of the town's budget that are really Board of Education, but they don't show up on the Board of Education side of the budget. So when you're looking at a functional budget of how much is the town, it's really less than the 40-odd% that's in there, and the Board of Education is really more than that. We've talked about debt service in the past, which is primarily, almost exclusively, Board of Education expenses. So if you split out the Board of Education throughout not only the Public Works budget, but certain other components of the budget, the fixed cost sections and so forth, the Board of Ed would tend to go up, and the town side would tend to go down as a portion of the total. So just an informational.
To the point the town manager was making, there is no exchange of funds from the department to the Board of Education for the work that's performed there. So we do the work, we do not bill them for grounds work. I believe they acknowledge it in a report that they file as a matter of course, but there's not an exchange of funds back and forth for that activity. The next area as you continue around is in orange, and that's facilities. That includes recurring annual maintenance costs for the 7 building portfolio that I identified earlier. The next major area is shown in red, and that's utilities. That includes gas and electric service, water, including irrigation, associated with not only all of the 7 buildings in the portfolio, but also select areas such as the Green and Maryhill Park and things like that. And then the balance are some smaller areas that are identified programmatically. Next slide. In general, the increase in this year's proposed public works and facilities operating and maintenance budget fall within the 4 major categories. 1 being regulatory, 2 contractual, 3 utilities, and 4 material usage demand. All 4 of these areas are outside of the department's ability to control or are directed. When considering all the areas of increase, they more than account for the increase over last year's budget. The sum total of these 4 area increases is 139%, which means that other areas of savings within the proposed budget compensate for a portion of the budget increase from last year. Regulatory increases include the unit cost increase by the lowest bid provider for the cleaning of stormwater catch basins across town. Also included in this is increased average usage of anti-icing and de-icing materials for winter operations. I mentioned a little bit earlier how we're well over our 5-year average, which is normally what we use to develop our budget. We're beyond that this year. These items all affect the road aid material budget line item, which is included in regulatory. These items account for an increase of $42,000 over last year. Another item affected in this area is building maintenance. This line item has increased approximately $65,000 due to proposed added work of annual duct cleaning, as well as asbestos analysis for town buildings. This work is new. It's new to the budget. It's new in the proposed budget, and it's intended to offset recent employee concerns and Connecticut OSHA evaluations that have been conducted at certain buildings. The budget increase to all of the regulatory issues is $107,000 and represents 2.1% of the budget increase over last year. The second item is contractual. These increases account for the largest increase to this year's budget. Contractual increases include increases caused by recent labor agreement changes. These cost increases are reflected in a few different areas within the particular budget. The first budget area affected is full-time payroll, including overtime and taxes, which shows an increase of approximately $144,000. Other budget areas affected as part of contractual requirements is uniform and clothing and lease payments, which show a collective increase of approximately $1,500. The budget increase due to all contractual issues is $146,000 and represents 2.8% of the total budget increase over last year. The utility line item increase reflects the benefit of improved utility management via our Amoresco recommended improvements, minus the annual cost increase for utility consumption. These increased costs are reflected in electricity to the tune of about $16,000 and water approximately $4,000 budget line items over last year. The budget increase due to all utilities is approximately $21,000 and represents about 0.4% of the total department budget increase over last year. And the final main area for reference is material usage, and the increase for this portion, according to the, with respect to the budget, is the smallest of the four areas. These cost increases are reflected in a few different areas within the budget. Material usage increase includes an increase in specialty tree removal services, equipment parts for added non-public works fleet vehicles, and exterior building and park maintenance. The budget increase due to all material usage increases is $10,000, and that represents 0.2% of the total budget. So in summary, the total budget increase over last year resulting from these four areas is approximately $283,000 or 5.4%. The budget increase being requested in fiscal year 19 for public works and facilities is only $175,000 or 3.2%. And we've been able to achieve that due to operating cost reductions and efficiencies. So just to restate that, the cost increase are greater than what's being asked for, and we've compensated for some of that increase by reductions in the budget that you see before you tonight. If we were to exclude the contractual salary increase, the proposed budget would be less than 0.5% for the upcoming year. And I give that to you just to give you an understanding of the impact that that has with respect to what's being asked for in the budget proposal. My top four goals for fiscal year 19, general townwide infrastructure improvements. This includes roads, drainage, buildings, and bridges. You know, it's not uncommon. We hear this often, not only for our town, our state, but across the country. Infrastructure improvements, particularly as they affect the Northeast, are critical. Our infrastructure is old. We need to pay close attention to it. We need to evaluate it. We need to prioritize it, and we need to apply monies wisely. And we will certainly do that as part of this proposal. And you'll see that in a little bit greater detail when we start to talk about the capital budget plan. Second goal is to optimize asset management efforts to include urban forestry. We have a need to perform an urban shade tree inventory. Some of you have heard me make mention of this when you had come to the department for the department overview. We've got an issue in this part of the country right now with our ash trees. The emerald ash borer is killing all the ash trees, much like you may remember historically the Dutch elm's disease killed all the elm trees. In order for us to understand the magnitude of what that's going to mean to our community, we've got to get an understanding of where all these trees are located. That is one reason, but not the only reason, that it's important for us to set this as a goal and make sure that we are able to conduct these inventories. In addition to conducting an inventory, we need to conduct a condition assessment. And we can break this up a couple different ways. We can do it just for Central Business District, town rights-of-ways, and then selected properties, and you'll see that reflected in the capital improvement plan. Fourth goal is regulatory compliance. This includes facility environmental improvements and benchmarking, as well as MS4 and DEEP compliance, particularly in the field operation area, as well as OSHA compliance in the facilities arena. And then lastly, for a goal, it's to seek alternative energy initiatives and recycling efforts, whether that's curbside collection, material reuse for, say, road millings reused and repurposed for another life, or general building improvements. And those could be new buildings being constructed or just modifications and improvements that we make to our existing buildings. We'll certainly do that with an eye toward recycling and energy initiatives. Top 4 challenges for fiscal year 19 are regulatory changes directly impacting staffing and budget. Again, directly back to MS4, stormwater, and environmental, whether that be runoff, the industrial permit that we're required to operate under, detention basin maintenance, or urban forestry authorities that are directed to me as my additional duty as tree warden from the Connecticut General Statutes, and there have been some changes to those statutes this year. Another challenge is implied increases to core functions and sustainable maintenance. So at the beginning of the meeting, I had handed out sheets to each of you that list what our core functions are. It's important to understand how we are built as an agency and what it is that we're designed to do, if you will, and understand that if there's anything that gets added to our core functions, it's important, and the challenge being that if it doesn't have a sustainable build to it, if we don't apply the right amount of labor, the right amount of resources, so that activity, that program, that whatever that gets added has a sustainable future for it, that's a challenge if we don't consider that. And also generally just including, to that end, including the PublicWorks in discussions as we talk about sustainable and impacts for different improvements that are made and proposed throughout the community to ensure that we could maintain and keep up those activities and programs. And then the next challenge is prioritization of funding and replacement of crumbling infrastructures, and that's done primarily through the capital budget. You'll see when we get to it that they have all been identified, and they've been identified in a priority order, not only for this first given year, but all of the out years as well. And then finally, the last challenge being operating out of a non-compliant facility. The code and safety improvements to the existing Public Works facility that are underway now will allow us to be more organized in our approach to our responsibilities. So I'm hopeful that that challenge will be met as we progress through fiscal year 19. So with that, I'd like to get into the review of the operating and maintenance budget. And what you'll see on the slide now is I'll start with facilities, and that might be a little bit difficult to read down this far end, but...
Do you have any copies of this?
I do not.
No copies?
I do not. Okay. I was hoping you would be able to see that.
Okay.
So what I've got here, what's up on the the board now is the summation of the facilities. And those numbers on the left are, as you can see, the account numbers, the account name. And then what I identified is the change from last year and what percentage that is. And I'll speak to each individual one of them as we go down. So the first one being full-time payroll. That is roughly a $26,000 increase, which is 5.6% above last year. And that's attributed to contractual raises, certification bonuses, as well as step increases that are paid to the employees, as well as labor agreement and reclassification of the facility manager. And all these fell under that area of contractual I'd mentioned earlier. The next line item is overtime. I proposed a decrease in this area of approximately $2,000, which is about 9%, and that's based on a 3-year average. So in the facilities department, we've been able to maximize our daytime work activities. So as a result of that, we're able to recognize a little bit of a savings on what we've budgeted for overtime. Payroll taxes is a slight increase of $1,800 or 4.9%, and again, that's linear. You'll see as we go through each division and we talk about payroll and payroll taxes, they're going to be pretty similar across the board, but those payroll taxes increase along with the payroll number. The next line item is other contractual services, and I'm proposing a $7,500 decrease there. That's a 100% decrease. I'm basically zeroing that line item out. That was the line item that was used to pay Amoresco's maintenance and verification. You may recall Amoresco was the energy services company that we had hired to perform the energy audit for all of our 7 municipal buildings. That maintenance and verification obligation has been met, so there's no longer a need for us to carry that M&V cost. However, the next line item, lease payments, there is a $1,200 increase to that line item, which is about 3.1%. That is reflective of the Bank of America contractual lease payments that we're scheduled to pay to Amoresco twice a year for the improvements that were made. The next line item is electricity, and again, if you look at the budget print documents that you have, you'll notice that in facilities, these budget line items repeat themselves 7 times. So you don't see the electrical bill as it's shown here. You see it 7 separate ways. It's kind of hard to understand it that way. So that's why I'm rolling it up this way, so you can see electricity as an aggregate. It's a much more manageable and understandable number to see that way than to see it for each of the individual buildings. Across the board, electricity is up $16,000, which is about 2.7%. That estimated rate of increase, that assumes the estimated rate of increase from Eversource and the projected consumption forecast. So we've got to not only, when we're planning for this budget, consider how much power we think we're going to use, but we also have to anticipate, because we don't know yet, what the rate increase will be. So those are 2 variables that go into this calculation. We have already assumed the benefit of lower LED streetlight costs. So that savings has already been recognized in the number you see up there. And I'll just mention that the Capital Regional Council of Government bid is what's used for our energy purchases. So we do that as part of a consortium, and we're paying about 7 cents per kilowatt hour until December, and then in December that rate will change, and whatever the new rate is based off of the CROG bid, we'll pay that. Next line item is heat and energy. Proposing a approximately $2,000 or 2% decrease there. And again, that's based on consumption and rate forecast. The increase was offset by the installation of a high-efficiency boiler at 785 Park Avenue. So this is a really good example of an improvement that we were able to make to one of our facilities, having a direct positive impact on our cost of doing business. So we took an old boiler at the police department that was not running optimally, and we replaced it with a high-efficiency boiler, and we're already seeing, projecting $2,000 a year in fuel savings by doing that. So that's a positive impact of some of the capital projects that we're able to get done. The next line item is water, and that's an increase of $4,000, approximately 11%. That's based on the estimated rate increase, as well as projected consumption forecast. Our water rate right now that we currently pay is approximately $3.14 per 100 cubic feet. And again, much like electricity we talked about earlier, that rate is good until December of 18th, and then I expect that rate from MDC will change slightly. The next line item is 53327, that's building maintenance. That's approximately $65,000 increase over last year, which is about 21%. And I referred to this a little bit earlier. That's directly attributed to the proposal to do duct cleaning in our building across the portfolio. Not only the cleaning of the ducts, but also to do asbestos-containing material and possible asbestos-containing material cataloging for those buildings. So those activities were proposed in the budget, and the cost associated with them is under this line item.
Right. Excuse me, John? I'd like for us to take a 5 minutes recess so we can get some copies of what you have.
Sure.
I'm finding it difficult to follow
Okay.
what you're doing with your presentation, so if we...
I don't know if I have, do you have a full set right there?
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah, I need, because I can't see from here. Because I can't follow the...
These are identical.
No, you don't want these.
Yeah.
Just make sure that
Just couldn't follow.
it's administration facilities. Yeah, is that all? That's all.
Just couldn't follow.
There unfortunately isn't.
John's like, what? What are you talking about?
I can go as fast as you'd like. We could go right to your questions and stop,
It's all
but
right.
Okay.
I wouldn't want to deprive the counselors.
Don't deprive us, it's depriving me of my bed.
You guys are on camera, just FYI.
Oh, it's,
I didn't know we were.
all righty.
So we're on, so we can pick back up. We were talking about facilities, and we left off with exterior building maintenance, I believe, was $2,700 increase over last year, which is 5%. That's as a result of recent bid estimates for landscaping and irrigation. So we go out every 3 years and rebid that for the portfolio, and the bids came back, so we respond to the results of the bid, and that resulted in an increase. Maintenance supplies is a decrease of 15%. Cleaning supplies was a decrease of 23%. Uniform and clothing was a slight decrease due to reflected lower monthly cost per employee. And then no changes for technical supplies, food and meals, or technical equipment was a slight decrease. So facilities in total is $96,000 above last year, or 5.5%. You go to the next slide, is field operations. Again, we'll start with payroll. It's roughly $96,000 above last year. Again, this is contractual raises, certification, bonuses, and step increases for labor. Overtime, no change to the overtime request. Payroll taxes increased linearly with the payroll, at roughly $7,000. No change to equipment rental. Other contractual services was a slight increase of $2,400. Again, that refers back to the specialty tree removal work that I'd mentioned earlier. No change to the bulky waste disposal line item. And just so you know, this bulky waste line item is not the same as the solid waste. If you refer back to that pie chart that was earlier in the presentation, that was mostly curbside collection. This bulky waste is when we, the department, dispose of items like tree stumps or concrete or old iron, things that are no longer landfilled and need to be disposed of. This is the line item that takes care of that. No change to cleaning supplies, a slight decrease on uniform and clothing. No change to construction materials, technical supplies, or food and meals. The item I wanted to focus on next is road aid materials. There was an increase there of approximately $42,000, which is a 21% over last year. And that's, again, as a result of anti-icing and de-icing agent increased usage over the last 5 years. Again, we're proposing in this budget to increase the amount requested to 1,800 tons. Even though we used over 2,100 tons this year, our 5-year average tells us that 1,800 is a more reasonable number to budget for. And if you're interested, we pay approximately $76 for treated salt and $56 for untreated salt. Also in this line item, also part of this $42,000 increase, is the increased cost for catch basin cleaning. So catch basin cleaning is a bid out work item. The cost per basin has increased from $23 to $24 per basin. So the math on that results in an increase to this budget line item. Traffic control supplies, we've decreased that by 27%, $8,500. Athletic field support, no change there. No change to building and grounds. Flower and garden material, no change. Recreation program support, no change. And technical equipment, we've decreased that by $6,000, or approximately 12.5%. That recognizes fewer major equipment repairs and replacements this year. So the entire summation for field operations is an increase over last year of $132,000, or approximately 6.9%. Moving on to fleet operations, payroll increases approximately $12,000, or 2.7%. Again, contractual raises, certification bonuses, and step increases. a decrease in overtime, a linear increase in payroll taxes commensurate with full-time employee payroll. Other contractual services, no change to that. Uniform and clothing was a 4% increase due to contractual requirements for uniform items that were not required in the past. Equipment parts is a slight increase of $5,000 or 2.3% over last year. And this is associated with the addition of another vehicle being added to the town hall fleet. Right, there's another vehicle provided to the building department for their inspectors. Gas and diesel has gone down approximately $42,000 or roughly 18%, and that's a result in a decrease in fuel cost of approximately 29 cents a gallon. The usage remains largely unchanged year to year, but the cost has dropped per unit. And just for your edification, diesel we pay approximately $2.03 a gallon, and gasoline we pay approximately $1.90 per gallon.
You got a quick question? Go ahead, finish.
No change to technical supplies, food and meals, or technical equipment. So as you close out fleet operations, it's approximately $27,000 over last year. A decrease of $27,000 from last year, or approximately 3%. And then the last of the four major pillars of Public Works is administration. Full-time payroll has decreased approximately $15,000 or 6.7%, and that relates to the deletion of the salary set aside for the analyst position. Payroll taxes decreased as well. Other contractual services decreased approximately 27%. That's primarily due to the environmental services contract was rebid after 3 years. Because we've had a really good approach to our environmental concerns, we were able to revise the scope because we've now been tracking things for 3 years, so we have less reporting requirements. So as a result of having less reporting requirements and rebidding, we've been able to recognize a smaller scope of work and smaller costs associated with it. And that $14,000 savings is a direct result of that. Education and training, we've decreased it. We've eliminated a certification program for one of our managers. Telephone and communications decreased by approximately $3,000 or 20%, and that's just a result of the monthly cost per device going down. And then no change to office supplies. So the summation for administration is a negative $35,000 or a savings of roughly 9.7, 10%. Yes, sir.
Can we wait till he's finished?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just wait till the presentation is done.
Okay. So what we'll do now is we can get into the capital. Now, in your spiral bound, I don't know if everyone has their spiral bound, the slides that I provided to you have the breakdown. I don't know if it's easier to see it there or if it's easier to see it in your spiral bound book. Yeah. But if you go to the next slide, Dan. So just for point of clarification, I know you can't see this, but this is the list of all 38 projects that are presented by Public Works to the capital budget, capital improvement plan. Next slide, please. These are the ones that are specifically identified for being involved in fiscal year 18-19, and we'll focus our discussion on them if we could. So I'm following along with my book as you go as well. So the first one is building code and safety improvements and modernization for 21 Southwood Road. These
What
are
page?
in your book.
Page 4.
Okay.
Page, yeah, is it page 4 or 5? Page 4.
Can I ask, are the 2017 and 2018 numbers, are those what was budgeted or what remains to be spent?
In the book, they're adopted.
So it doesn't say if it's left there to be spent or not.
No, it doesn't say it's spent, that was the adopted budget. That will show the
So presumably some of that's already been spent.
That's correct.
Okay, so moving on, the first item is building code and safety improvements and facility modernization for 21 Southwood Drive, the Public Works facility. Again, I think the thing I want to highlight here is that this project supports Chapter 8 of the Plan of Conservation and Development, page 97, where it refers to maintenance of existing facilities, and the plan specifically refers to the Public Works facility. The next capital project is the roadway improvements. Again, this project supports the Conservation Plan of Development, page 20, maintenance of existing roads. Dan, can you go to the next slide? I just want to invite your attention up to the slide that's up on the board, and it should be in your handout packet. You may have seen this before. I'd used this in a presentation for community outreach, as well as the presentation that many of you attended at the Public Works Department. What's important to consider here is on the left-hand side of that slide, as you're looking at it, is the road surface rating from 68 to 71. And you can see the circle on the left there is the current rating of the roads for all of Bloomfield. Obviously, across the bottom is left to right is a timeline. You could see in the white square box there, it shows that our RSR, our road surface rating for the roads across town, is 69.37. That number's lower than we would want it to be as a community. We want it to be, over 72%, 70 to 72% or more. The timelines, or the dollar lines rather, that are shown in red, blue, yellow, white, and green show respective increasing dollar amounts committed to the project. And although it's kind of hard to tell, that yellow one at 1.2 million, that's actually slightly below. So at 1.2 million, we're losing ground on our road surface rating. And it's not until we get to 1.4 million that we're making a slight increase. And even though for the purpose of this presentation, the lines are exaggerated on how they're shown, it's only going from roughly 69% to just over 70% in that chart. I bring this to your attention because that 1.4 million mirrors what's requested in the capital budget in present day dollars in order for us to not lose ground on our road condition rating. The last thing I'll mention on the bottom of that slide are the different percentages of activities on how we approach it. So you can see we do percentage-wise, approximately 10% of the money that's committed to this line item is spent for crack sealing. 20% is used for surface treatment, which would be micropaving, cape sealing. Rehabilitation would be milling and paving. That's about 40% of the monies go toward those types of roads. And then last but not least, the most expensive of all the treatments is reclamation, and that represents about 30% of the monies for that particular line item. The list of roads that have been identified are included in your spiral-bound budget packet, and if you have questions, we could discuss those as well. The next project is equipment replacement. This is the replacement of trucks and heavy equipment for the Public Works Department. The one thing I want to mention here is that we have 15 primary pieces of large dump truck snow removal equipment. We have 15 primary routes, so we run 15 vehicles and 2 backups to use when one of the primary trucks blows a hose or breaks down during a storm. The average life expectancy for one of those trucks is 12 to 15 years. That's with good maintenance, good care, good washing. They're in a pretty corrosive, pretty demanding environment, so it's not expected to get much more time out of them than that. The reason I mention that is the replacement cycle, for the purposes of budget planning, is really never ending. By the time you buy the first one and you get to the 15th one, you need to replace the first one all over again. So in essence, for the purpose of discussion for capital planning, at a minimum, every year we need to buy at least one of those vehicles just to, like the roads, maintain our ground on where we are with fleet. Not to mention all the other items that we have that total up to those 300 pieces of rolling stock. Next item is the Human Services Building. I think you'll go into probably more detail with the different directors for that particular project, when they, or if they've already briefed you, so I'll pass over on that. The next project is the chiller replacement at Town Hall, and I want to talk about this project and the next one, which is the reinforcement of the mechanical room floor together, because they go hand in hand. The floor in the mechanical room is deteriorated to the point where the reinforcing rebar is exposed, the floor is weak, and the floor needs to be replaced. In order to repair and replace that floor, which, by the way, we already have a design for, we're just waiting for the monies to actually do the work. In order to do the repair on the floor, you've got to take the chiller unit out, repair the floor, and then put the chiller unit back. It just so happens the chiller unit is at the end of its life cycle. So my proposal is that you consider both of these projects together. When you take the old chiller out, repair the floor, and then just put a new chiller back. Don't put the old one back, because you're going to be turning around and replacing it the next year anyway. Both projects support the plan of conservation and development. I refer you to page 97, where it discusses community and facility issues specifically. Also, the mechanical room floor, oh, never mind, I was going to make a reference to that, but I think I've already covered it. Moving on to sidewalk management. The focus of this project is to address public sidewalks and walkway repairs that have been deferred, and in many cases, existing sidewalks are original and in various states of failure. So each year, we propose one of the 5 public works districts across town based on priority and risk. This project is supported by the Goldman and York capital budget agenda, and it also supports the plan of conservation and development under transportation section, page 79, pedestrian circulation. I want to note that this does not include the sidewalks in front of Town Hall. I know those are an issue. Those are covered separately, so that's a separate project. These are out and about the community. Next item is urban forestry assessment and right-of-ways. I spoke a little bit about this earlier. This deals with doing a townwide tree inventory and inspection and assessment. This is supported by the Plan of Conservation and Development, Chapter 2, page 26, protecting the habitat and vegetation. This would also result in the review and rewriting and updating of ordinances with respect to trees. Similarly, the next project is urban forestry, but in the central business district. So this takes a look not just at the trees in the right-of-way, but it looks at trees on all properties, public and private. So trees that are existing, say, on Wittenberry Mall, would be viewed and assessed. The objective there is not only to do a condition assessment, but to also do a species identification, so we would know what we have for tree types across town, and we can then make a recommendation of where we need more variety, what's working in our area, in our community, so which we want to plant more of, which we want to plant less of, so that we have a good diverse inventory. The next project is Prosser Library entrance parking site work improvements. This project would complete the merge of the Prosser Library lot to the adjacent Masonic Home lot and entail creating a permanent parking space by reclaiming, fine grading, and paving. So if you've been over to Prosser, you know that when that Masonic Home was taken down, the area was graded, but it was never paved, and it's a little steeper than it probably should be. So there's some improvements that need to occur there. There's also some improvements that need to happen to the back of the building along the entrance area to make it more ADA compliant. This project, again, supports the Plan of Conservation and Development on page number 98, referring to community facility issues. The next item is improvements to the police department locker room. Project after that is Town Hall sidewalk. So this is the one that I deferred to earlier. This involves the removal of the existing sidewalk and the stamped concrete curb out here in the rotary right outside the building. Again, this project is referenced by Goldman and York in their CIP agenda, as well as being referenced in the Plan of Conservation and Development page 97, where it talks about public spaces and maintaining existing facilities.
Does this include the entrance, that whole entrance?
Yeah, so it doesn't. What I envision we would do is, once you get underneath the portico, it's in pretty good shape. So, but right where the portico starts, we would need to do a new saw cut across it, so we would take
It's
that.
awful.
We're going to wait till the thing is done.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so I'll move on. Next project should be logging and forestry management. The purpose of this is to include, to hire a certified forester and develop a long-range plan for the management, land management included as part of 3 different areas, specifically Farmington River Park, La Salette Park, and Wilcox Park. The objective there being that we would log those areas, and we would use the sale of that timber to then refund the project. So basically, we're looking to thin out the forest in those areas and have it be in a self-reliant program. So the money made from the program would go back into the program. This is supported by the Plan of Conservation and Development for Managing Open Space Outreach Strategy Item 3.22 on page 43. Moving next to the Business Continuity Infrastructure Project. This was proposed and funded in last year's budget. Jim, not to put you on the spot, did you mention this already? I don't want to repeat myself if this is something you had gone over.
This was a project idea that I had brought from my last town, where there were a lot of projects that needed to be done to ensure the continuity of business operations in a major disaster, storm, or also security improvement issues. So rather than funding huge projects all at one time, we funded $25,000 a year and did projects incrementally over time. So this is something we funded last year. We were hoping to use that for some improvements to the tax office, and it was proposed to fund an even amount of $25,000 a year.
Thanks, Jim. Next project listed is Mucko Road construction. Mucko's an old dirt road, unpaved. It's an old farm road. It's been top dressed with milling for years. We've got a business, a heavy truck commercial business at the end of that road. The road requires a tremendous amount of maintenance. Consideration should be given based on the volume and the size and the weight of the traffic on there to not only provide a better wearing, more permanent wearing surface, but also to provide some drainage to that road, which it currently does not have. And this is supported by the Plan of Conservation and Development Maintaining Existing Roads, page 90. Next project is property survey and DEEP negotiations. This is specific to the property at 30 Southwood Road. The intent there is to do a thorough A2 survey as well as topographic survey of that property in accordance with state regulations conforming to A2 standards. The objective being to map out the area, map out the wetlands, classify the water courses, and then enter a discussion with DEEP to see if they're interested in doing a potential land swap. But before we can do that, we've got to know the limits and the boundaries of the particular project. And again, this supports the Plan of Conservation and Development for Community Facility Issues, page 97. Next one being flooring replacements. We have a tremendous amount of floors throughout the portfolio. What we do with this particular line item every year, and we ask that it be funded every year, is that on average our floor coverings are about 15 years old. So what we do is, with the monies that we're provided, we go in and we do a percentage replacement. So not only is it a replacement of the worn carpeting, but we also try to address in those particular areas that still have it and haven't been addressed, asbestos-containing material tiles. So when we do particular office suites in this building, Town Hall, for example, we'll go in, pull the old carpeting out, remediate the asbestos floor tile, and then put down no more tile. We'll just put down carpet tiles now and be done with the project. And we do that slowly in pieces across the entire portfolio. And this supports the Plan of Conservation and Development Building System Replacement, page 96. The next one is decorative street lighting at the town center. So the intent for these dollars is to replace, there are a couple dozen streetlights in the town center area that are not currently part of the Eversource relationship that we have, so they're not maintained by Eversource. So as you drive around the green, you'll see some of those big, tall, concrete street light posts that have been knocked down. Eversource doesn't, they don't stock those, they don't maintain those aren't their poles, they're our poles. They were done as part of a community development project that may have been done, some of you have been around long enough to know, when those projects may have been done years ago. Those poles,
It was a redevelopment project in 72.
what year?
I think it was in the 70s.
In the 70s? So those poles are not replaceable the way they are. The intent for this is to go through, every year and replace a few of those poles with decorative style poles similar to what is currently in Philly Park, and what is the same poles are proposed to be done on the town green. So the purpose of this project is to get those few that go up, say, toward Rite Aid, or the ones that go up toward Sacred Heart, that are outside the scope of any other project. We want to try to address them separately by this. Next one should be 800 Bloomfield Avenue roof replacement. I don't know if you noticed it when you parked outside on your way in this morning. It was a big aerial lift out in the parking lot. There's a company doing here that started today doing slate roof tile replacement and repairs to the roof here at the Town Hall building. This project proposes to replace the roof. The slate roof is original to the building. Looks great, but it's very worn, very aged, and we've been doing patch repairs to it for quite a while. The proposal of this is to do a total roof replacement to that gabled roof that's on top of Town Hall. We got a couple left here. 1 Tungus Avenue, that's Prosser Library. This proposes to do a refresh. This is a one-time proposal to go in and do some interior work consisting of ceiling grid replacement on the lower level, painting throughout, limited restroom improvements. The building was recently painted in many areas, but some areas haven't been addressed in 10 or more years. The wholesale approach would be more cost-effective. There's some spline ceilings that exist in the lower level that are in poor shape that need to be replaced. The intent of this is to go through and aggregate all those small improvements and do it as one project. The next item is guardrail repair and replacement. This is a project that we request funding every other year. The project requires the restoration restore safety and to reduce significant liability should an accident occur. There are warrants that dictate where guardrails are required. For the most part, the guardrail that we have in town, when it gets damaged or when it gets worn or it's past its life age, we replace it. There are a few areas, not many, that we've noticed. One just came to mind on Wadham's Road. Thanks, Dan. Wadham's Road. We had some trees come down in the last storm, and these trees had acted like a Mother Nature's answer to guardrail, but the trees are no longer there. So the warrant now exists, the warrant being that if the shoulder of the road slopes off vertically more than 4 feet over a certain area, then a guardrail is there to prevent a car from going off the edge of the road and then rolling over. That's the warrant that requires a guardrail. For the most part, the guardrail repair we do is damage. In this particular case, there's an area now where we've got to put in several hundred feet of guardrail, where we didn't need it before, and these monies would be used for that purpose. Next project is a coil replacement at the police department. So I referred to this a little bit earlier. We talked about the coil replacement we had done that had saved us money. There's a second rooftop unit up there that also needs to be replaced, and this project reflects that. I expect that when we replace it, we will also see some significant energy savings from the new higher efficiency one that we would put in versus the one that's currently there. And that, I could stop there. That really ends everything that's being proposed for in the 18-19 fiscal year. prepared to talk about the ones that go in the out years, but for the sake of brevity, and I know you want to get to some questions, I'll just go to my next slide and then my last slide, and then we'll turn it over to questions. So concerns and issues, some concerns that I have looking forward into the upcoming fiscal year is developing more diversity within the department. We are, as a department, above the national average for diversity, but we're not where we as a town and a community want us to be. So we're better than most. We're continuing to move in the right direction, and we're working with the town manager and the guidance that he's been given by you. We're working with HR to try to effectuate that through some of the changes that we're making. What I'd like to do is I'd like you to consider, even though I hadn't asked for it in the budget, to consider the inclusion again, even though I've removed it, consider putting back the analyst position, because from the well, one, it's needed, but specific to diversity, I think this is one position where we could achieve it greater than we could with some of our more technical ones, where they're more, I guess, male-driven. I think we can get a better chance of diversity because this position would be more business-oriented, and there's a greater chance that we could probably achieve some of that goal with that hire. Next item being improving the facility to adequately support operations. Fortunately, that's happening right now. I'm pleased about that. A concern is aging equipment. I alluded to that earlier when I talked about one of the first items in the capital improvement plan of replacing equipment. Failing infrastructure townwide, we talked about the roads and bridges and buildings and facilities. And then last but not least, developing an urban forestry plan, particularly as it relates to the need to address the ash tree concern. All of these concerns and issues support, greater, initiatives from both the town and the town manager. I've emphasized them for your purpose as you go through and review the budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to any questions you might have.
So just because we just touched on the diversity portion, I know that at our first town hall meeting, we had some issues or some questions being
Sure.
raised about PublicWorks and the fact that we have so many minorities in town, and that there was not a minority supervisor in PublicWorks for a while, and that was from an employee that had been there maybe over 20 years, I think he said. So I want to be clear when we're looking at that, the minority inclusion, the wording is gone, but I don't think it's just, and I'm sure this is not the way you meant it. I don't think it's just trying to fill an analyst position with a female, but it's looking at the whole, your whole minority.
No, I agree. And my reason for mentioning that is, and I apologize if it didn't come out correctly, that position is more broad-ranging than some of the other ones. If we're looking specifically for a maintainer or for a mechanic, it's harder to find diversity there than it would be for an analyst position. That was the point I was trying to emphasize.
Right.
So I apologize if that didn't come out right.
No, that's okay. I saw in here that there was money, or I think it was like $1,000 for a cadet program, because that was one of the issues that was also brought
Yes.
up, is that whether they're apprentice, whether it's an apprenticeship program or something like that, just like how the police department trains their cadets, and hopefully those cadets will at one point join the police department. I think we could probably do something like that with
I agree.
apprenticeship and public
I agree.
works.
I agree. And I've been working on that program, and quite honestly, we're just, waiting for the financial go-ahead. We've structured one, have had conversations with Human Resources about how best to fill it.
It's part of the budget freeze. We did not implement it.
Yeah.
Even though it's ready to go because of the budget freeze. There are a number of these different things John's brought up that have not moved ahead as much as we'd like to because we've frozen. And that's not only within this department, it's within a number of departments. Don't forget, we're 1.2 million shy because of state funding cuts in the current year and the failure to move ahead with the supplemental tax bill on autos. Okay? So we've got to make up that revenue somehow. We've made up part of it through a reduction in tax refunds and so forth, but we still have ways to go. And if we get out of that and we lift the budget freeze, and the Board of Ed's in the budget freeze too, then we can go ahead and start implementing some of these programs. Another good example is, and it was brought up last night with the services building, there's a lot of material storage down at the existing 330 Park Avenue. Some of that is land records in the sense of maps and subdivision documentation and so forth. It's all hard copy. We put $65,000 in the current year's budget to start microfilming and digitizing that, so we wouldn't have to have a storage space for it. That's completely on hold due to the budget freeze as well, so we haven't moved ahead with that. And we literally got another $130,000 that we would need to appropriate. If you look at the capital budget, you'll see it underneath in there under engineering to complete that project. So we've not budgeted any more coming year for that project either. So a number of these things are on hold in abeyance until we're sure we have the money to go ahead and implement them and still meet the budget requirements for the current year.
Which is all good and well, but here we are in budgets, and there's a lot of things being asked for, a lot of increase in salaries and all that stuff. And if we're looking at the needs of the department and we're looking at the needs of our residents, I'm sure there's some way that we can figure it out, especially if it helps our students who may not want to go to a four-year college, who wants to do an apprenticeship program, who's looking for a skill. So I think that's a win-win. Win-win for that student, win-win for our town, and win-win for our department. So I think that's something that we will definitely need to take a look at. I see Jim, like you're chomping at the bit over there.
Because the number in there for the cadet program is actually $40,000.
40,000, okay. Okay, that's fine.
If you look in your books under the details,
I just saw it on DPW, the
yeah,
one.
the lining up sometimes
Is off.
The lines is a little bit off.
Okay.
So if you look under the education and training line under administration, you see it's the third item down.
Cut it down to just...
Well, thank you for the clarification. As much as these books cost, they should have been lined up a little bit different.
That's actually not the book, it's the report.
It's the report. Okay. That's fine. So even if you're going to make that investment, once again, it benefits all around. And I think while we deliberate, I think that might be a good place to go ahead and appropriate some money. So that's my only thought about that. I know that there were questions, so if we can, Elizabeth, any questions? Joe? Counselor Merritt, I'm sorry.
Yes, I have.
And then we'll go this way.
I didn't understand exactly what business continuity infrastructure, $25,000 a month, a year meant.
So first of all, I'll point out that that was one of the line items that the town manager cut.
Yes, I see that.
So the point of this was we learned this lesson in my last town because we had so many consecutive large storms. We didn't have a generator, and so we actually hired a consultant to develop a formal business continuity plan for town hall to ensure that our town hall, in the event of something like a tornado or some kind of major disaster, was still available to our residents. So the $25,000 a year was set aside by the council to be used for whatever projects were identified by the Public Works Director that year. So it could be the security of an office, to improve the security of an office. It could be to procure some kind of generator, and that obviously might take a couple years of the $25,000 before you can buy a big generator. So it was just used for miscellaneous items instead of putting one large line item in at one time. That was recommended in our business continuity plan by the consultant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
That was it?
That was, no, I had some other questions. So most of these things have been struck out by the town manager.
Struck out.
I believe the ones that I spoke to, I tried to skip over the ones that were cut out. I guess I should have just skipped over the business continuity one. But I think all the others were in there.
Oh, the sidewalk roundabout replacement on the front of Town Hall, that was struck out as well, wasn't it?
Yes, that was taken
Yeah.
out. Despite all of the reductions that the manager made, the general fund portion of the capital budget is still up almost $400,000.
I have no argument, I was just pointing that out. But I do think it would be nice to at least repair the entranceway to Town Hall, which looks abominable to me, it has for years. So if that could be made to look good without, the rest of the roundabout I don't care about. I just, walking in, every time I come into Town Hall, I think how terrible that looks.
Agreed.
I have sympathy for that because the Public Works Department patches it with hot patch and it's stuck in your shoes, and brought in on the carpet, and despite their best of intentions, it's sometimes
They don't like cement? I
let
don't know.
alone visual issue.
Well, that is a project that, I know there's a lot of struggles to try to find all the different monies, and that's been a project that we've been proposing for a while, and it's just hasn't risen to the point where it's gotten funded, but.
So I got a quick question just pertaining to that. So how long this project has been on the books to be taken care of?
I would say probably, I think we put it on 4 years ago.
Are you kidding me? 4 years ago? Wow.
I'll have to go back and check, Richard, I don't know exactly.
So
I remember putting it on because of the deterioration out front. At that time, I think it was $40,000, now it's $65,000.
The problem with the capital improvement planning process is that when everything is laid out and is shown in a 5, or even if you go out for some projects further than that, if they don't get funded in the first year, what happens is everything starts to stack up, and what ends up happening is a project that doesn't get funded just sort of lingers there in the first year, and it just keeps making that first year number look bigger. So it just becomes more and more of an ominous budgetary, hurdle to get over. And unfortunately, this project is one of those that just sort of falls victim to that.
I wanted to make the point that I don't care about the rest of it. Is that really, just to make that entranceway look better, going to cost that much money? I can do it.
No, that's,
I do some cement patchwork every spring, and if you...
no, this is, you've given a much more simplified approach, and that's not what was considered in that number. That would be something different, yes.
Yeah, so I'm looking...
But it also wouldn't be a capital project, so the problem then is, if it falls below a threshold and it's not a capital project, it becomes even more of a challenge, because now you're asking me to take it out of an operating budget, which I don't have. So I don't have project money like that in the operating side, so you're better off doing it right and doing it as a capital project, quite
Well,
honestly.
we can bring it down to $25,000 and maybe get it done, so... Anyway, okay. I also, well, I guess that's enough. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor,
No, go this way.
Councilman Cleary?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question. I noticed we have $1 million in the budget for roads and maintenance of the roads. It was $1.4 million. Could you speak to why that is being cut? Because as I drive around, I see a lot of roads, particularly in our neighborhoods, in some very, very, very bad conditions. I know you have this little, this chart about the stages of the roads, but I've been getting a lot of calls and emails about people wanting their roads paved and corrected. So can you speak to the process so the public knows how you determine which roads are scheduled for paving
Sure.
or milling?
Absolutely.
In defense, if I could interrupt, Ken, I was the one, the manager, cut that. If you gave it to John, he would ask for as much as he could get to do roads.
And I would agree with
I
him.
reduced it to $1 million in the capital budget. It is the largest single item other than the two major building projects in the budget. But, and I would say to you that if we didn't get the $1.7 million capital grant from the state this year, which we didn't think we were going to get,
So he didn't.
Several years ago, before we began getting that grant, the town only budgeted $260,000 for road work. And so we let it go. So we've invested well over $4 million, close to $5 million over the last 4 years in road rehabilitation work. So, but I was the one that cut that down from what John requested.
Okay.
So the way the process works, and I'll try to summarize this as succinctly as I can, all roads are analyzed every year. So every single road is looked at and is given a rating. Those ratings are then compared in one of two ways. A best to worst with respect to road surface rating, and also a best to worst with respect to cost-benefit value. Cost-benefit value considers a road like Woodland more highly than a cul-de-sac that has only a few houses on it. So if the road surface rating is the same, Woodland would edge it out because the amount of traffic, the amount of people using it would demand it to be done first. So we look through those two scopes as we analyze 100% evaluation of all roads. Things that impact roads on a year-to-year basis are obviously just the deterioration. So it spans 1/20th of its lifespan every year, so it degrades a little bit. However, if the road was cut for utility purposes, or if there was a water main break or something like that, you could see that road go from a sort of a linear downgrade to take a sudden drop. So one year it could not be on the list, and the next year it could not only be high on the list, it could be almost at the top of the list. But for the most part, roads decay, generally speaking, on a linear basis. So we analyze every single road every year. We look at it from an RSR, best to worst category, and also from a cost-benefit value. And then we lay all that out on a map. And then we look at, okay, what are the technologies? I didn't talk about them in my presentation tonight in too great a detail, but we could do crack sealing, which happens in the first life cycle of a road. You can do micro milling, you can do overlaying, you can do cape sealing, you can do milling and paving, you can do full depth reclamation. All of these things, as they go, not only increase in cost, but they increase in the manner in which the road has to be done. So if a road is so far gone, half the technologies won't even be used because the road it just needs to be completely rebuilt. So when a road identifies itself for a particular technology, we then say, okay, this particular road needs to get done. It now is going to be applied with restoration cost units, not crack sealing cost units. So now we put a dollar amount to it. When those roads are identified, we then try to look at other roads around it, because we pay, even though we take advantage of the state bid for the purposes of road restoration, so we get the lowest possible bidder for everything. So we know we're getting good prices. Every time the contractor is required to move, we have to pay a mobilization fee. So we want to aggregate roads that are in a certain area. So if I can use you as an example, Your Honor, if your road for your house needs to get paved, and the deputy mayor lives 2 roads over, and his road maybe doesn't need to get paved for another year or 2, but yours does, we may end up just aggregating both of yours together, because your road is going to need it soon. I don't mean 5 years from now, but I mean within the next 2 years, and we now don't have to pay the contractors a mobilization cost. Mobilization costs, if you're not careful, will add up and will dwarf the cost of some roads. So all of these different things go into kind of a big logarithm in determining how we identify which roads get done. Is that succinct enough?
Yes, and just two brief more questions. I was trying to look, and maybe I overlooked it. I know in other areas of the capital improvement budget, we have projects for parks, but I don't see any money to upkeep daily parks, so we don't have this deferred maintenance and these major, problems where we have to come in 2 to 3 years and spend 50, 60, some cases $200,000 on a park. So could you speak to that? And then my second question is, I know there's been a big issue around speeding in certain neighborhoods, and I know some people have mentioned speed bumps, and I've heard that the big holdup was PublicWorks because of something about the plows and EMS and emergency services. So can you speak to if it's possible to potentially
I'll
do a
speak to
trial of speed bumps for speeding in certain areas of the town?
I'll speak to the latter. I'm professionally not in favor of speed bumps. They do present a concern, speed tables as well. They present a challenge for us for the maintenance of roads, and they often could impact stormwater runoff, and they could intercept stormwater runoff in gutter flow analysis. So for those reasons, I'm not in favor of it, quite honestly. I've been in other communities where we've had them. We've had very mixed success with them. So that's my opinion on speed bumps, and I suppose the police chief would have an opinion on those as well as the local traffic authority.
I might add that there's a manual published by the Federal Highway Administration called the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, and that is the Bible for signage, speed bumps, and all kinds of regulatory and other road devices and so forth. So if you have an accident and the lawyers get sharp and they start measuring the distances between the intersection and the sign, they measure the type of sign, the measurements of it, they look at stop signs in the middle of roads where there's no intersections or whether there's speed bumps, and then they go to the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices. And that helps build their case against somebody in a traffic accident or something else. So it's a risk management issue as well to do these things. And they never say you can't do something, but the risk, what I've seen in the court system, is that the lawyers will go out and check on that stuff. And if you're not in conformance with it, you're potentially, the municipality obviously is potentially at risk in a lawsuit. Yeah, that's just another aspect of it.
But when you talk about lawyers, there's risk in anything, and they can twist anything, so, you know.
The best, my opinion is the best way to control speeding is through enforcement. Stop signs, people often say, well, I live in a residential neighborhood, people speed down my street, we have a mid-block intersection, I want you to put a stop sign. Stop signs are intended to be for maneuvering purposes. They're supposed to control the flow through an intersection because people are making turns. The purpose of a stop sign is not to slow people down. The purpose of speed tables and speed bumps to slow people down has its downsides. From a maintenance standpoint, I hope I've clearly stated those, but also from a road user standpoint as well. With respect to parks and park money, I'd ask you if you could be a little bit more specific on what you're looking for with respect to parks, because, and I'll qualify that question. The Leisure Services manages and operates the activities that take place in a park. So we conduct the maintenance. So we'll do the mowing, line striping on some of the fields. We'll go in and help them when they do their annual analysis of the playground equipment. They're qualified and certified to do that. They'll determine that there are nuts and bolts missing. We'll go in and assist them by putting it under their supervision. But we're really the grounds aspect of parks. If there is a use perspective, pavilions, courts, things like that, that falls under Leisure Services, and that's generally addressed through their submittals, to the capital improvement plan.
If you go to the CIP on the back, under the tab, under page 3, and we discussed this somewhat the other night, you'll see that in the current proposed budget, we've got $629,700 in leisure services for capital projects that relate to parks and leisure services, including a pool, the splash pad, and the others. You can go down the list and see. Pershing Park is in there, rehabilitation or revitalization plan, and so forth. So it's on page 3 under the capital budget tab.
I understand that, but I go back to the money we allocated for the tarp for the roof for Farmington River Park. Like, if we were, keeping a watchful eye on that property from the boots on the ground, we would have known that roof was deteriorating, and we would have taken a proactive step to kind of repair it and do those things.
Well,
So
we did know.
So we didn't put any money in the budget to kind of...
A determination hadn't been made on what was supposed to happen with the building, quite honestly. That's true. No, the building was supposed to be torn down.
Okay.
So the building shouldn't be there to even see the.
But I'm referring to not right now, but I'm talking about before we got to where we are now, or...
That building was being maintained up until the point where a decision was being made of whether or not it was going to exist. So that the condition you see it in today wasn't the condition that it was in when we were maintaining it on a regular basis. It was also occupied at the time. So it was an occupied property, so you can imagine its condition was much different than you see it today.
All right, thank you.
The money was included in the budget in 2013-14 to demolish the building. At that particular time, the council decided that they didn't want to demolish it, but they didn't go ahead and put money into it to keep maintaining it because there was not a focused use of the particular property. There was some discussion at that time of taking 2 or 3 acres that surrounded the house, selling the house and 2 or 3 acres on the open market, taking the money from the sale of the house and that property, putting it in a trust fund for the maintenance of that property, similar to what John was talking about in terms of our forest management plan, where if we went in with a forest management plan and did some selective cutting, the proceeds from the wood that was gotten out would go into a trust fund for the maintenance of those open space parks, you know, the trails and that sort of thing. We did that very successfully when I was over in Avon, and it was a revolving program with a professional forestry management firm and everything else. And they maintained all of the trails and the parks and so forth for it. But as it turned out, the property was purchased under federal money with the Bureau of Outdoor Recreation grant, which was managed by the Department of the Interior at the federal level. And to get the property to be sold, you would have to replace it with more than like property. So if we took 3 acres with the house on it and it was valued at X or Y, we would have to replace that with open space property somewhere else in town that they would agree to accept before we could free that property up to sell it. So at that point in time, the council decided not to move ahead with the project, and there was a lot of debate as to what to do, whether we should still go ahead and tear the house down or not tear the house down, and it's now where it is, or has been in the last year. There's still questions about what it can be used for, and it's going to be discussed in the master plan for that particular park that the Parks and Rec Commission is looking at.
Thank you.
Councilor Marshall-Neely. Thank you. With regard to the roads and the road repair, I'd like to know how much you take into account on the number of years that particular section of a road has been in disrepair before you decide to do something with it. I'm specifically asking because the Burnwood, Pheasant, Cliff Mount area in Bloomfield, that section of road has been in disrepair for more than 5 years. I know this because I'm a walker and a jogger and biker, and I get off my bike or stop walking and take a picture of it, measure the size of the potholes, and we get patchwork. And anytime anyone in the neighborhood drives over that, it actually damages your car. Now, I know that I have been trying to get something done other than filling those holes with a little bit of blacktop for a long time. And so I know this has gone on for more than 5 years. I just want to know from you, how many years does that have to be in disrepair before you say, okay, this is serious enough for us to take a look at, other than just filling it in with a little bit of blacktop?
We endeavor to maintain all the roads, so if we're made aware of potholes, we'll go out and do the repair. When a road is done as part of the annual complete, pavement improvement, part of the $1.4 million that we're proposing, the roads that end up there are the worst roads in town short answer is, the age of a road is important, but the condition of the road is more important than the age. We've got a lot of roads, and it's a little bit of a long answer, so bear with me as I give a more broad brush explanation. Roads have a tendency in their first life cycle, the first 20 years of their life, to fade faster. And the reason for that is, generally speaking, that's when the homes are built in that particular neighborhood. So the road will be built and homes will systematically, in a 20-lot subdivision, 2 or 3 homes may go up at a time, and it may take, the better part of 10 to 15 years for all the lots to be sold off and built. And when that's happening, there's utility cuts that are potentially happening for each of those lots. So the first 20 years is the most tumultuous time, potentially, of a road's life. The second 20 years, after that road is then gone through and milled and paved, the second span of its life generally runs longer than 20 years because nothing else is being built, nothing else is happening to it, so it tends to last longer. Specific to the age of a road, the age of the road is almost immaterial. We've seen roads here in town that are so old that literally all of the bitumen is gone and they have more of a grayish white tone to them than they do the more bituous black tone to them. But there's very little radial cracking, there's very little drainage concerns or issues, there have been no utility cuts, so it's able to extend its life out. In that case, the road wouldn't be paved regardless of how old it was because its condition wouldn't warrant it. To the specific item that you mentioned, when a resident calls us and notifies us of a pothole or we notice a pothole, we'll go out and do patch repairs. We make all of those patch repairs all get fed into the system. The reason Burnwood Road or any particular road wouldn't get paved in a given year is because, as bad as you may think it is, it's not as bad as the roads that are actually on the list to be done.
If you want a list of the roads that are scheduled, it's in your book. It's right behind the capital budget page. A memo from John and myself dated January 8th.
Do you know that?
And both sides of that memo, not only the bottom, but the next, flip it over and it's on the back side too. And it'll give you the roads and the type of treatment that is being proposed for those roads.
But we will do maintenance outside of the annual road restoration program. We will do maintenance within, whether it's pothole patching or whether we will go in and do a more larger sheet patch for a particular area as it's warranted. But generally, when we're doing those kinds of repairs, that road's pretty high on the list. We're just waiting for the funding to come for us to do it.
Okay, because I just wanted to know, to you and to our town manager, that it has been several years, and I know this because I'm the one that was going to the town manager's office to let everyone know that there's a problem, and that I was measuring it with...
If your interest is on that particular road, I can get with you offline. I'll find out where it is on the priority list, and I'll provide that information to you.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor DiLorenzo?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, John, as usual, very thorough, thank you. Very thorough report. I think one of my questions was already answered, but just for clarification, the cadet position, is that included in next year's budget?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought, I just wanted to confirm that.
If I could, for clarification, we're referring to it as an apprentice program, not a cadet program.
Okay, so the system analyst position, how much do you need for that position? And is it full-time or part-time?
It was listed as the salary that was in the budget that was removed was only part-time.
Okay.
But I prefer it to be full-time, and I'd have to get back to you with those numbers.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know what the numbers are for that.
Probably 80 to 90,000.
80 to 90 with benefits,
I'm hoping we could do it for less than that.
with all the benefits
All
included,
with
the
benefits.
insurance. Full-time analyst position. Okay,
Figure
so,
on benefits that they're about 50% of salary.
What
That's what they come out to. That can vary with the type of insurance, whether it's single person, a two-person, or a family member, whether they're in the high deductible health plan, or whether they elect to go into the PPO, preferred provider option, we still offer.
Right, yeah, it's still available. Okay, so if we could get those numbers, and then if we could get a description of what the role entails, what they would be doing. So then my other question is for the field operations area. I think that was the only area that I saw overtime. Is that attributable to the winter storm stuff?
Yeah, so field operations overtime falls into really three seasonal areas. It falls into winter operations, spring operations, and summer operations. Winter's obviously self-explanatory, mostly has to do with snow removal. Spring is all field preparation, roadside mowing, pruning, things like that as we're getting ready for the spring season, mostly athletics-driven, grounds-driven. And then summer, the overtime mostly has to do with the construction projects we do, stormwater, road repairs, and road restoration. Those are the three areas. So if you look at our budget right now, you would see that we haven't expended year-to-date where you think we might in overtime, but the reality is we have overspent for where we should be based on how much of that overtime was anticipated to be for winter operations. So we're actually already spending well into the spring overtime money, which means by the time we get to our summer programs, we're going to be out of the overtime money.
So when you say overtime, it's any hours over 40 hours
Correct.
worked, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And
Anything outside of the normal work hours, which are 7 to 3:30.
okay, so does that include weekends and?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know, I guess I might want to look at that more. I don't know, do you have any solutions to eliminating overtime or reducing it greatly?
We've reduced it greatly over the last 5 years, significantly.
Well, I know the chief has as well, so, okay, so you have reduced it.
So the biggest...
Is it capacity issues, or?
Well, it's a couple things. So the biggest factor of those three that affect overtime in field operations is snow removal. No one here can predict what kind of a winter we're going to have.
Yeah.
So we can only go based on, recent history to help us determine and budget accordingly. And that's the biggest impact. The others are spring and summer operations. Let me start with, go next to summer operations. That's our paving program. Our paving program and our catch basin cleaning, so we have to provide supervision to that operation. Contractor comes in and, they want to get in and get out as quickly as they can, and we want them to do that because that means that's less money spent, right? Get them in and get them out as quick as possible. They'll then turn around and say, we want to work from 7 in the morning till, 6 o'clock at night. We don't want to stop at 3:30. If we do, then it's going to make the project take 35% longer. Okay, so we're going to incur a little bit of overtime in order to get that project completed and get it out. And we want that as well because not only does it cost potentially less money, but getting it done quicker frees up our resources to then go off and do something else. The second part of that equation is the spring, and that's driven by athletics primarily. How soon the Board of Ed and how soon Leisure Services wants the fields prepared. How much work do we have to do, again, is somewhat dependent upon the kind of winter we had. How much damage we might have had, how much flooding we might have had, so it's hard to predict it. Again, in summary, we've reduced our overtime across all divisions significantly over the last 5 years.
Right.
I don't know that we could squeeze much more because none of us can sit here and predict with any precision those three main factors.
Yeah.
But we're always looking at it.
I think Joe wants to have, but then I want to
Follow-up comment if I
We're
can make.
actually...
Joe, just write that down, yep. We'll come back down that way.
Okay, so you brought it up, John, so Board of Ed, I know, do they still have their own separate facilities? They do. So
Inside, they do. We do the outspace.
okay, everything that's outside, but we don't really get compensated for it out of the board's budget.
Correct.
The athletic department has, in the last there's been an increasing level of complaints from the athletic department about the caliber of the fields in some cases. Some of that's due to capital issues, drainage, and those types of issues. But it's also due to overuse in some cases. The varsity teams like to practice on the varsity fields, and then we get complaints when the game comes because they've already used them.
They're
And we
messed.
try to work with the athletic director and the other people at the Board of Ed, sometimes successfully, other times not so successfully.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, that's a situation, I mean, I guess if we have the board do it themselves, then that's going to get into their budget, it's going to be more of an expense, or if they just give it all to us, then, or to the town.
When you look at maintenance, we have more capacity and depth on outside maintenance because we're doing fields and roads and parks and so forth. They have more density and depth on internal maintenance. because they have so
The
many
buildings.
More square feet of building that they're maintaining than we do.
So it makes sense to divide it. Didn't the board also just put down all brand-new turf on the football field? And I thought that was supposed to fix all of the drainage issues and...
On that particular field, yes.
And it wasn't supposed to require maintenance, it's supposed to be maintenance-free, or there was supposed to be a special piece of equipment that you would just use to fluff the grass so that wasn't bent over?
So you're correct on, to a certain degree on all those points. The only field of all the fields that was reconstructed in that manner, in the artificial turf manner, was the football field. Everything else remains a grass turf field. There was a piece of equipment that was purchased as part of that project. The piece of equipment, rather, is used throughout the year on a prescribed basis to clean and level off that area. What's good and unique, and I wanted to emphasize this, about that field is that we, the town, we, the Public Works Department, have a maintenance agreement with the Board of Ed. So we sat down in the very beginning and clearly spelled out capital equipment purchases and repairs and the what we'll do, what we can do, what we can't do, what they want us to do. So everything is laid out, so the level of service expectation is better on that field. I wish all the fields were that way. And the sustainable, I mentioned that earlier in my presentation, we have to have an eye towards sustainability as it relates to maintenance. That's the one field where I think that has been properly addressed. We've identified what the level of service is, what we're going to do, who's going to do it, who's going to pay for it, and when it's going to get done. But that's only one field of all the other fields that need to be maintained. And as the town manager mentioned, there are some serious drainage concerns. There are some capital improvements. The expectation on the level of service from the Board of Ed, particularly through the athletics department, is such that they want the fields to be at this high standard. They get played so much, they're in a point now where we can't maintain them on a regular basis. They're not regular maintenance items. These are points now where the fields need to be rebuilt. Drainage needs to be put in, significant changes and improvements need to be made, and it's just, no one's taking it on their plate to assume the cost of responsibility or prioritize when that's gonna get done. So every year, the complaints get a little bit greater and a little bit louder. And we do our best to maintain the fields, but we can only do so much with the condition that they're in.
I might indicate to you that the first 4 years, or 3 years that I was here, there were no capital budget submissions from the Board of Ed to the town. They handled those internally themselves. And I talked to, when Mr. Guzman came on board with the Board of Ed, I said, and if you go to most communities, the Board of Education does submit capital projects to the town, and the town council or Board of Selectmen in the smaller communities include those in their deliberations on the capital budget. The issue of lighting came up last night on some of the fields. That would be a capital budget item that could be put in here. 400,000, if it's 800,000 like it was discussed last night at the building committee report, you could put 400,000 in one year, 400,000 in the next year. By the time you get the design work done and everything else, and you'd have to stage the construction so that it was done to be ready in the fall, so you could construct a schedule, I guess what I'm saying, that the 2 years, and I know it's everybody's desire to do it all at one time and not split things apart, but sometimes scheduling and other things make sense to do that in terms of budgeting and funding. But those types of things could be requested. That doesn't mean they're going to get funded, but at least they're on the list to come to the town
Right.
and be deliberated, and the Board of Ed could make a pitch for them. You know, we want this or we don't need this. On town items, it could be done the same thing. We've got lighting in some of these for the tennis courts and so forth. Check.
Yeah. We've had it in before.
On the agenda
Tennis.
last night to get the easement, you know,
Right.
the power.
Yes, I saw that. Just quickly going over the capital improvement plan for Public Works, the sidewalk repair and replacement, is that reference to Mountain Avenue, or is that yet another
No.
separate?
That's separate.
Okay, so what department does that come under?
Engineering.
Mountain Avenue,
Yeah,
engineering.
under engineering? Okay.
That's in the right, it's in the slope right procurement stage.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we're still
And
at,
there another one of these 2 or 3 year types of
Yeah.
projects. We have the funding pretty much in place for that,
yeah.
Patrick?
Yeah, okay. And then I was just curious about this mechanical room chiller thing. Why couldn't that work be done when we had the whole replacement of the boiler system? Is this totally separate from the
Because I
boiler?
didn't get the money to do it.
Yeah, I was just wondering,
It could have been done earlier. We could have done it already, quite honestly. It was an issue of funding.
yeah. So how long, well, I know the town manager doesn't have them in the budget, but how long can these go before they create a problem?
I don't know if there's a definitive answer
Yeah.
to that. I mean, it's in the capital budget, it's something that should be done, but you're talking over $500,000 to do it.
Right.
And it would be a major deferral of other things, so I think, you know, we kind of Band-Aided it and worked it along, and sometimes it's got to be done. And then
Yeah.
it becomes a real problem, we're going to have to change
Find a way to do it. Yeah, well-
Just to that point, this is not the first year those projects have been on the capital budget, so
I don't remember seeing,
my
yeah.
hesitation in answering was, 2 years ago when we put them on for the first time, I might have said we might be able to get a year or two out of it. Well, we're a year or two later now, and I'm hesitant to say we can go any further.
Yeah.
You have to remember that each department head is going to push for their capital budget items, okay?
I know.
They're lobbying you. and-
No, well, as I tell the town manager, these are not my projects. I remind him, these are your projects.
At
So,
the end, we have to balance things out on a priority basis. and
That's what we do.
That's what the council does.
The only other one, I too agree that walking up to the front entrance of the town hall is terrible. It's just
concur.
really unsightly and as a resident of the town who, comes into the town hall to do other business, I do feel that there's really no reason why we can't find a way to repair those sidewalks. And even as far as the, what did you call it, John, the walkway,
Rotary.
no, the roof that's over the...
all right, the portico that covers... the-
Portico, yeah. So the bottoms of those pillars, they're totally rusted. You have to wonder if they're just going to fall off and the thing's going to fall crashing on someone. I don't know, but
I think part of the delay too was that we had the library project going. and
Yeah.
we put money into it, if the library's going to be here, we'd have to rip it out.
Well, I think during our deliberations, we should find some way to figure out how to reprioritize some of this work to get that in, because, I think it's the first thing you see when you come to the town hall. So as a resident, I think it would go a long way to make some improvements to the actual town hall. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor, for indulging me.
Councilor Mann?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a few questions. I wanted to start out a little bit with administrative issues, following up on the questions of Councilman Di Lorenzo. We don't have the benefit of having figures from previous years. I'm talking with respect to overtime in this issue. And while you say that you've winnowed it down as best you can, I'd like to know what kind of an evaluative process you have and goals that you set to reduce overtime. Or are there other alternatives, comp time, say, in off-season? Are there any other ways to control that, or is that sort of a union issue or workforce thing that you've gotten yourself into? How does that work out?
Overtime is a union issue. The rules and the payment of it are directed by the labor agreement. I will tell you that compensatory time is already available and actively used. Quite honestly, the labor force has a tremendous amount of compensation time, so much so to the point where sometimes it's a challenge for us to get the staffing we need to do certain things because people are taking advantage of comp time. So I would be reluctant to encourage any more in that particular area because it would challenge our ability to meet our requirements as an agency. The budget should show you what the overtime numbers were for the previous few years.
Same, it's from last year.
So you should see that there has been a reduction. You probably don't go back as far as I was referring to in this particular book, but those numbers are available. We have in fact reduced overtime in all of the only 3 divisions that have it: facilities, operations, and fleet. But we're always looking for ways to cut it. But as I stated earlier, the thing that's driving overtime primarily are those seasonal changes. So it's winter operations, spring and summer. Labor agreement recent changes now require certain coverages, which it didn't before, which puts an added demand on overtime. But even still, with that, we're able to try to, and we have proposed some cuts. But there's just some work that has to occur outside of normal working hours.
I understand.
Because the demands are placed on us by other agencies, quite honestly. And, we always have a sharp eye at trying to control that. There's just not a lot more that could be cut out of it safely without assuming a tremendous amount of risk.
Do you maintain lost time records for your employees? Out on health or other kinds of issues that they don't show up for?
Yes, I mean, we have, every paycheck has leave checks on it for vacation, sick leave. They're all coded if an employee is not there and what it's used for, what the time was used for by the employee.
Does your lost time records indicate that more time is taken off than not? I mean, this is not a new administrative technique.
David, what we do is, or at least I have the HR department analyze it. I want to see how much time is taken off on Mondays and Fridays, okay? I want to go ahead and see what type of time was taken off. If there's sick leave, a lot of sick leave taken on Mondays and Fridays, and last summer we did a whole analysis by every employee on their Monday and Friday sick leave, and we put a warning letter out to each employee in PublicWorks that this seemed to be excessive, and that we were going to start requiring doctor's notices and this sort of thing. And all of a sudden, the amount of sick leave taken on Mondays and Fridays tended to decline significantly, okay? So we monitor all of these things, pretty thoroughly. And we can determine who's taken the most sick leave this year. We rank them.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I didn't know that existed, and I was asking because this is the kind of agency that's probably more prone to lost time than most others.
Well, police is the other one.
Okay, so we're keeping an eye on that, and I think it's important for us to understand that those policies and programs are in place and to get reports on them periodically. I see that you also have a safety bonus for people who don't hurt themselves on the job. Do you have a health and fitness bonus for people who keep themselves fit while they're working on the job? I see some people out there looking like they're ready to have a hypertension event. They're a little bit out of shape for the work they seem to be doing, and it's only heightened by the appearance of those big orange jerseys they're wearing. And I wonder if we're making an effort to keep our workforce healthy, keeping them out fit, because I've been in this business for 23 years doing similar work, and I didn't wind up looking like that. So I'm concerned about that
we have a comprehensive wellness program with programs put on through Cigna, our health care. They're provided to us as part of our health policy. We have a gym here that people can use. We have a special rate that the town negotiated with terms of years ago with the gym over at the plaza over there, the Ocean State Job Lot Plaza. We have a health fair that we jointly do with the board.
So we have the facilities, but we have to get the guys too. Is that the issue?
Mandate this stuff.
I understand.
You can lead the horse to water, which is sometimes difficult to...
I understand.
But I agree with you.
And it gets to the next question of union requirements for job site work. The numbers of people standing to do a job I assume that's a union thing because there's so many people standing around looking at things. I mean, if we're looking at money and getting a job done, these are the most obvious that I would put out there. And I would hope that we would have a more constructive and challenging set of goals for our employees if they want to work for our town. So I look forward to whatever you have to offer us in the future about that. A couple other questions. What is our present relationship with the Windsor landfill? Do we have any rights to put things in there without paying them, or do we own any aspect of it anymore?
It's no longer a landfill.
It's just a transfer.
It's a transfer station. And yes, we, the town of Bloomfield, have a relationship in the ability to utilize that. All the residents of Bloomfield do utilize that to the extent that they want to, as a transfer station.
So you don't get, you get a discount on your bulky dumping, your green waste?
We don't bring bulky waste there.
The green waste, $8,000 is in the budget.
That goes to places like EnviroCycle or DMR when we're getting rid of concrete. We don't, the materials, that line item in the budget is not to pay Windsor to bring things to Windsor.
Okay, what is it for?
It's to bring material to places like DMR or EnviroCycle, where we're getting rid of contaminated trees, or we're getting rid of stumps, or we're getting rid of some kind of earthen material that goes to EnviroCycle, or if we're getting rid of concrete or things like that, it goes to DMR.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a line item cost in here for Philly Pond maintenance, which is the same as it was last year, and this year, it's going to be all torn up. Why is that number still there?
That number's there because that is to spray the aquatic material to control the water chestnut.
That's going to be an issue while
It'll be an issue during construction, absolutely.
But it's the same 43,000 as last year, something like that?
I don't think it's 43,000.
43 is what I thought I saw in there.
I don't know if you're referring to the capital budget. The number I carried in the operating budget is not 43,000, but
it was maintenance for Philly Pond. But then that's all for the water chestnut?
Well, you were asking me what we were doing at Philly Park, and we're spraying for the water chestnut, yes.
It takes me a while to find it in here. I'll have to look another time. It seemed to me the question was jumping off the page because the park is inaccessible, will be for the year, so if it's that much for the water chestnut, I'll take the word at this point until I find it.
If you're referring to costs that have to do with engineering, I would defer to engineering for the project standpoint, but our costs are just for the spraying, and to reiterate, we would continue to spray through the construction cycle because we would be spraying the upper water reaches and the lower water reaches to try to control the water chestnut there because it's spreading, quite honestly.
Okay.
So even though Jonathan is going to dredge the pond, we would treat the tributaries in and out of the pond.
The Oliver Philly house is in here for maintenance, and there's about, I think, 14,000 or something like that. I don't know what the status of that building is. It's been vacant for some time. Do we have a plan to utilize it, or can we rent it?
It's more on the leisure services, David West of but to give you a brief overview, there's a number of things going on. First of all, the town brought in the Connecticut Environmental Review Team. There are 2 environmental review teams in Connecticut. They're funded by professors and assistant professors out of the state university system. There is no charge to the town, and the town can propose a project to have the environmental review team come out, take a look at a piece of property. They do the flora, fauna, forestry, land management, a whole bunch of, if there's water on the property, the hydrologist, or aquaculture agriculture people and everything. Sometimes 8, 10, 12 experts that come out as part of the environmental review team. And they, in essence, inventory and canvass the property. In this particular case, it's the property on which the house is located, and Hawk Hill, that was recently purchased in a cooperative arrangement with the town and the Winterberry Land Trust. They divided the property up, and there were, I think, 4 specific activities to be conducted on the close to 60 acres of the property. One of them was a forest management component. One was a field maintenance component, and that field is contracted out under a lease with the people that are raising the Scottish Highland cattle off of Doncaster Road. Okay. 2 of the other pieces, one of them around the house is designed to be community gardens. The Public Works Department last year went in during the winter, completely cleaned out all around the foundation of the old barn that's adjacent to the house. We have a grant this year from the Department of Agriculture to support putting community gardens in where they cleaned that out. The house itself was turned over to the Historical Society 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago. The town was successful in getting a $300,000 plus grant for the property. It's got heat in there, it's got water, it's got air conditioning.
But who uses it?
Nobody uses it.
No, that's my point.
The inside is not finished. Okay? It's bare walls, studded and labbed, okay? There's no plaster on some of the walls and so forth. We're working towards slowly getting a grant. We have already received 1 grant to stabilize the 2 barns that are behind the house because they were about ready to fall down. Wade's had all kinds of equipment stuff in there because they had been leasing the same field that's now being leased by the Scottish Highland cattle people. And essentially, we've stabilized the barns, we've put roofs on them, or fixed the roofs enough so that they're stabilized. We are setting up what's known as a local government historical board, okay, which is a precursor to getting grant money from the state, from SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, so that we can get grant money to finish the inside of the house and complete some of the other improvements around the house.
So it's not habitable right now?
Specific use for it that anybody's asked for. I think one of the more creative ideas that came out of the environmental review team thing was to go ahead and use a portion of the land as a vineyard or as a hops growing thing to support the craft beer industry, or if you had a vineyard, have a wine component on that, and you could have the caretaker for the property live in the house. That would offset some of the wine or beer growing or the hops. These are all conceptual stuff. We've been working with the Land Trust extensively, particularly Dale Bertoldi and Vicki Risky and whatnot. We have another grant that's lined up. We will be getting $32,000 this coming year to do work on the property. So it's a viable project that's being worked on to bring it back. But it was dormant for, I won't say decades, but dormant for years. We pay maintenance costs, electricity and power costs on the building, but if you shut that off, you're going to have the same stuff starting to happen that happened up at the Farmington Park.
Well, yeah, I hear you, and I appreciate that. My point was, we need to be somewhat proactive and entrepreneurial with the space, otherwise it's going to wind up like that. Either we're going to maintain it or we're not going to maintain it. We could rent it, maybe it's rentable. I don't know. It sounds like it's not habitable at this point.
The town seems to have a proclivity of gaining these properties and houses and then not, to be honest with you, having a gainful use or maintaining them to a state that we would appreciate their being used. It's a historical house.
Beautiful.
The Historical Society bowed out of it and gave it back to the town probably 10, 12 years ago. I talked to Richard Pearson about it and why they backed out.
Well, my thought was just to move the process forward if we can, think a little bit out of the box and see if we can find out other use for it, rather than continue paying maintenance on a vacant building, because that's that's probably a losing proposition. Excuse me, a couple more other issues. This is my primary issue, however, and it came up to a head when we were talking about roundabouts. My concern dealing with not just the Public Works Department here, but most Public Works departments, is they're really not staffed to handle horticultural materials, plants, and so forth. They're good at cutting grass and lopping branches off of trees and stuff like that, and I don't mean to demean that process. But when it gets down to doing finer work, you're very rarely do you find a staff that has people that can handle that. And with a roundabout situation, when that was coming up, it was clearly in the most poignant part of our community, the centermost part of our community, and the last thing I would ever do would be approve a roundabout that would be built and designed by the State Highway Department, meeting their standards, because I don't think it would fit our town center image that I would hope to achieve. So I'm asking you, in the next budget or this budget, if there could be a horticultural type person on staff, or at the least, the Connecticut Nursery and Landscape Association runs programs every year to train people in the landscape industry as to how to deal with this material. And I took that course, I don't know, 12 years ago, and there are plenty of people that come from building the Yale department, Yale sent their people down. I think there's some other DPW departments. So if you can't necessarily find somebody that you can have full-time, at least you can give them the training to do what they need to do when it comes to maintaining the material that we're spending a lot of money to put in our parks and around our buildings. So I ask you about how you feel about any of those issues.
I would love to have a horticulturist on staff. We do send folks to those classes that you refer to. You know, we've got quite a few people who've come to us with varying levels of experience in, horticultural, landscaping, tree pruning, things like that. I guess I'd have to know a little bit more about the specific details, and maybe we can talk offline about what it is that you're particularly looking for us to determine whether that's something we do have the expertise already in-house, or whether we have to add that expertise or training.
Okay.
I think
I'd like to do that.
You generally don't get the specialized positions in communities this size. You generally get them in larger communities in, I'd say, 50,000 and up categories. So it may be an opportunity to do some sharing with Hartford or with New Britain or with Manchester or something, where we pay for half of the contract with them?
I'll go along with the second part of your statement. We could do it with some sharing, but Hartford doesn't have any better situation. When we replanted the Corning Fountain at over $100,000 or more, maintained it for a year, looked great until we turned it over to the city. So, I mean...
It's generally has not been a priority.
Yeah, well...
To have, David.
I understand. But I would like to talk to you some more about that.
Is that your next question?
Absolutely not. I sat here for 2 hours, at least get 20 minutes. My comments others have made with regard to the town hall entry, absolutely agree that we did experiment with that stamped concrete. That seemed to be the worst part of the whole process out there. The mix didn't hold up, but now we have other alternatives. I think it need not be all that expensive. You possibly could cut in some brick pavers and get rid of the patches. There are a lot of different solutions to the problem, and I think it's important, it's extremely important for the town to set the best tone of what it looks like if we're expecting residents and businesses to follow suit. So that, to me, is one of the higher priorities. I don't know whether there's a difference between speed bumps, and to answer the question to Councilman McCleary's question, we heard what you had to say about speed bumps, but what do you feel about roadway narrowing? That's also a way of reducing speed on the roads. Is that a more acceptable form of solution to that problem?
Roadway narrowing is more acceptable than speed bumps or speed tables. I guess we'd have to look at the individual areas where they were looking to do the work. I'm not sure which areas we would look to do this, but if it allowed us to maintain it, I would certainly be in favor of that. The concern on the narrowing would be, a lot of times, if you don't make improvements to the stormwater drainage and you leave the catch basins back further, but you narrow the road, so the water has to run down the gutter and has to take a corner because the basins were left where they were, which end up happening a lot of times is that area in front of the basins freezes over in the winter because they're too far back and the water can't get into them. You end up having a ponding problem. That would be something that I would ask you to keep in mind. But, to take a road from 32 or 38 feet to a narrower 24 feet, if everything moved in with it, generally speaking, shouldn't be an issue.
I think too, David, as you know, we're talking about that on Blue Hills Avenue up in Hartford, Cottage Grove Road area.
But when you do a road diet where the curb line, is no longer parallel and it kind of dives in and dives out, sort of like we have over here on Jerome Avenue, you have those bump outs for the cars, it's posing to be a problem, maintaining it in the wintertime for us and for the property owner. So those are things that I think on a case-by-case basis, I would look forward to trying to design those problems away.
Okay, I think they can be. Energy audits. I think we were very successful in bringing down the cost of energy in this building by the Amoresco audit that was done here. And I'm wondering whether or not that success is causing us to look in other public facilities that we have to do the same thing.
All the time.
We have an active program?
Well, we do. I mean, the two buildings that that weren't included in the energy audit are 330 Park Avenue and 21 Southwood Road, because both of those buildings were supposed to be getting major upgrades. But yes, we're always looking at things. And I mentioned the police department, so we did minor aspects of that with respect to Amoresco, but yet we went ahead and replaced those air handling units on the roof. We replaced one, now we want to replace a second one, so there's energy savings there, and you saw that demonstrated directly in the budget. So we're always looking at ways to make improvements.
So there
Foster Library, we're not doing all that much until a decision is made, ultimately what we're doing there, but I could see some potential energy savings. Energy is one of those things where we're always keeping a watchful eye on it, because you saw, if you remember, one of the very first slides at the very bottom, I showed you what we spend a year for gas and for electricity and for water. So I'm like if your dad was the one running around telling you to turn the heat down in the house and turn that light off, I do that for the entire town, and I have Chris and others to help me do it. We're very, very aware of what our energy costs are. And we're always looking for ways to reduce that energy usage, like not turn the heat on in rooms that don't really need it. Council chambers, for example.
Well, I appreciate that. Having worked with you,
much to the chagrin of folks, but we're aware of it, and not to make light of it, but yes, we're always looking for ways.
Having worked with you when I was on the CEC, I know that you're capable and interested in doing that, and I just want to give you more opportunity to do that. And at that, I thank you all for your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Mann.
Oh, gosh.
That's enough for tonight for you. No more questions from Councilman Mann. So I want to go ahead and read the Public Works mission statement. Public Works mission statement. The mission statement of Public Works Department is to provide quality operations and maintenance services to the town of Bloomfield. Are we providing that service to Bloomfield right now at the highest quality? What do you be able to say, John?
There's always room to improve, absolutely. Are we providing the services? Yes, we are. Can improvements be made? Absolutely. And I think it's incumbent upon this discussion, this process, to determine what level of service do we want to provide, and then we apply the appropriate budget to make sure that we can get to it. So if there's an interest to make things better, I'm all for it. The department's all for it. Let's have a conversation about where we want to be, bring that level of service up in the budget to support it.
And internally, what kind of self-evaluation do you do to gauge those progress that you're providing the Bloomfield residents, the service that they basically hired you to do? And what gauge internally do you have to self-evaluate that you are providing those services?
Well, we use standards. For example, the audit process that we went through as part of the accreditation was a way for us to look at, national standards. Are we conducting business and doing things, that are industry accepted. Yes, are there ways to improve it and modify them either up or down for Bloomfield? That's something that's got to come out of this discussion. If there's a feeling that we need to make improvements, I'd love to be part of that
And
discussion.
do we have those reports, those evaluation reports, to see if we are meeting those standards?
Well, we had the evaluation report for when APWA came in and did the accreditation, yes.
So you have that available?
But they don't do it annually. They won't do it again for, I think, another 2 years.
So when was the last evaluation?
They did it the evaluation team was here in December of, I think, 16, right? So accreditation started effective January of 17.
Are those reports available now?
I can ask APWA for a copy of it.
Okay. And
is there something specific that you want to address?
No, this general, just from the top down. I just want to make sure we're providing those service to the town, and we're using some sort of matrix where we can see that we are, in a sense. And for the areas that we're not, if we go back to, you said 2016 was the last time?
December 2016 is when the evaluation accreditation team came.
So if you had that evaluation on that report, were there any highlights in areas of improvements, and did you meet those?
Yeah, so some of the things they specifically mentioned are reflected in the budget. So the things that they said that needed to be improved were we did not have a comprehensive urban forestry plan, which generated those 3 capital budget items. You know, their feeling was we don't have a good handle on our urban forest. We don't. We need to do that. So that manifested itself in those capital budget items. As I mentioned, there were 5 things that they thought we did above national standard, and they became benchmarking for other communities. The other things that I think that stood out in addition to urban forestry was the condition of the fleet they talked about. They were pleased to see that we were making those improvements, but they recognized that, you know, there was a lot of improvement that needed to be made, but they didn't go so far as to make a negative comment about it, but they did make an observation about it. But as far as conducting business and policies and procedure, they were pleased with the standard and level of service that we had.
And I think, Richard, a couple of maybe more smaller scale types of things are fleet maintenance software, where we can start looking at mean time between repairs at a more detailed level. Certainly the new fuel system that's going to be going in will give us a much better tracking mechanism on vehicle usage and so forth, so we can look at the productivity of the various, you know, vehicles and equipment that we have.
Vehicle replacement life cycle specifically.
Yeah, life cycle costing aspects, really, which we're not up to where maybe some others would be. So I think that those are some of the factors we can look at. And you have to develop indices that are generally acceptable, and most of the professional associations and through the accreditation process develop these indices, okay? And they're generally peer-reviewed, acceptable indices that you can then start tracking. But then you very often have to have the software, and you have to have the input. You can get into, you know, analysis paralysis types of issues too. But I think that, you know, I think that's one request for John, and he's going to have to wait in line as far as I'm concerned on the research analyst, okay? But it's something that we did have somebody come in for a while to work on the accreditation on some of those aspects. And it's definitely something we need. We don't have any research analysts in the whole town, at least on the town side. We have to do it ourselves, you know, so.
And that's
it's a matter of developing them and then monitoring them, and you got to have the inputs. Somebody's got to do the input, and then you know, you got to take the output and analyze it, and then look at how you interpret it.
Yeah.
You're in management, you know all that.
Yeah, and obviously the big elephant in the room is the human service facility building, 330 Park. That's a perfect example of deterioration and lack of attention to it. I mean, give me a broad scope when it comes to the public buildings within the town, and how do you coordinate with the various departments to meet the needs, to make sure those buildings are being properly maintained, and we're identifying when there's an issue? What kind of process do we have in place?
So we have regular conversations with the department heads. So when I'm getting ready to sit down and do the capital budget proposal, we'll have a deliberate meeting with each of the, I'll call them tenant agencies. You know, if it's in the case of the police department, there's just the police department, they're the only one in the building. In the case of 330 Park Avenue, we'll meet either individually or collectively with all of the agencies that are there, and we'll get their perspective on it. So from our perspective, we know mechanically what's wrong with the building. So again, if I can use you as an example, if you happen to occupy as a department in one of our buildings, you might be more interested in the color of paint on the walls because how it impacts your operation, where I might be more concerned with the roof. So when I express to you what my concerns are for the building envelope, the building operation, the building efficiency, and then I hear your comments, I basically put them both together and then they go into the capital budget. But I make sure that the people utilizing the building understand things from our perspective, because we see, generally the things that we see are more behind the scenes and much more expensive. So, you know, Roberta LaMonica, as an example, is never going to say, hey, I need a new roof. I'm going to say she needs a new roof because she doesn't observe her roof, but she's going to say, hey, I want a new window there, or I want a new door. So we have these meetings where we sit down and we hear each other out, and those things that then get aggregated and put into the capital budget. On a day-to-day basis or on a week-to-week basis, the staff that are occupying the buildings are having regular conversations with Chris, facilities manager, or Glenn or Jimmy, the building maintainers, to talk about what improvements they want to see made. Things that we can do ourselves internally, we do a work order, we schedule it, we do it. Things that can't be, we put it off to the side, we get a cost to it, we determine whether it's something that we can do internally or whether it's something that we have to potentially outsource to a specialty contractor, or whether it's something that's got to get rolled into the capital budget.
So let's use an example, the roof leaks at 330 Park. Are you aware
Of course I'm aware of that.
So
Yeah.
can we is that able to fix? Are we able to fix that, or what's the?
We're in the process of trying to fix that leak, but I will tell you that I've been saying for years that we need to do something about the building. We need to make a decision, and the the whole roof needs to be replaced in total.
Oh, but that's fair, but my point is, I mean, you have kids using the facility, and you have to block off an entire section of the gym because of a leaking roof.
Listen, no one is more sensitive to the condition of that building especially than I am, because it's a reflection on my department and how we're perceived at maintaining it. That building is 1950s construction. It needs a significant amount of improvements, or quite honestly, it needs to be, leveled, and the new one needs to be built. We have been keeping it running, and pardon the turn of phrase, with bubble gum and baling wire for several years now. Every time an issue comes up, we immediately address it as best we can and as comprehensive as you can, with an eye toward making sure that we don't put so much investment into it that it's thrown away money if ultimately the building is decided to be torn down. So that's a fine, budget razor edge that we walk on a regular basis to make those improvements. But yes, we're aware of the leaks that are in that building right now, and we're in the process of trying to fix it. Just like we're in the process I mentioned earlier, trying to fix the particular damaged areas here of Town Hall.
Okay, so thanks for that. That's good. I want to get to employee evaluation. What percentage of our staff at PublicWorks are contractual and what are non-contractual employees? What's the breakdown between the two?
Everyone is covered by a union agreement except myself, Dan, and Chris.
Okay, so everyone. That's good.
Yep.
And do we have a performance review for everyone?
No, we do not.
We do. So
the union contracts don't allow it. The only time an employee in the union gets an evaluation is at the end of their probation.
So you're saying that we could have employees who are not performing their jobs, but there's no way to evaluate whether or not they're delivering that service to the residents of Bloomfield?
Through an evaluation process, yes, because we don't have one.
We don't have one. So do we have...
Not that we don't want one.
How do you get one in that sense?
It would have to be negotiated with the labor union. It would have to be, agreed upon with them.
And no one see value in that?
Oh, you betcha I do.
So have we brought it up before?
We absolutely have.
And it was shot down
Yes,
as far as... And what's the reason for it?
The union wouldn't agree to it.
Okay, so do we do self-evaluation for our managers, yourself and...
We do.
And who does those evaluations?
I do the evaluations on the management, and the town manager does an evaluation on me.
And that's annually?
It is.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Oh, my goodness, so it's been a long night. I think I only have like 2 questions. One is, there's a meal budget. What is that for?
That is a contractual requirement when the Teamsters are required to work overtime. They're paid meals at set times of the day. So if they're working at 6 a.m., they get a $12 stipend each for a breakfast meal. And if they're working at 6 p.m. in the evening, they get a $12 stipend for an evening dinner meal.
That's only on overtime?
That's only on overtime, right?
Outside of regular work.
Outside of regular working
regular
hours.
work. Okay,
Yep.
excellent.
And midnight as well.
And midnight.
Yep.
If they're on-
So if they worked around the clock, they can conceivably get one at 6 a.m., 6 p.m., and then midnight.
I'm gonna put an application in at DPW, I'm just putting it out there. You have here an administrator/analyst already on the books. Is that 2 separate persons?
That's the position that's not funded.
Okay, so that's the $82,000 that we're taking out.
Right.
Right here. One fleet administrator.
Oh, that's the fleet manager. No, that position's been in.
Okay, so this is separate from the analyst?
Correct, yep.
Okay, so the analyst isn't in here at all?
Correct.
And Phil is probably thinking that the whole town needs an analyst, so that everyone can probably share
I
that.
think we'd all love to have an analyst.
Just one? Just
Well, you
one.
know, I don't want to get fixated on the term analyst. You know, someone with analytical skills that's above a clerk typist position. I need someone with advanced administrative skills that can help do some of the analysis and the deep dives on some of the things that we're here discussing this evening.
Okay, all right.
So I don't want to fixate on that term analyst.
Not lobbying for a position and whatnot. There are other positions too that I didn't include in the budget, like an assistant planner.
Yep, that's okay. That's all right.
This whole sustainability program facing us,
Yep.
things like that. But I will support his need. I don't have any qualms about that.
Right.
It's more on the priority of things, how do we get it with the budget situation.
And I hear you and I understand, probably if it's someone that the town can probably hire, that all the departments can make use of, because instead of, and I hear your need, but instead of an analyst, I would really like to see that apprenticeship program take off. So it's that trade-off that we're going to have to make while we're looking at the budget and making sure that we are taking care of the most needs. I understand your need, but I also understand the needs of probably an apprenticeship program for our children. So I thank you for your presentation. I think we have one more question. What?
There's a couple more questions.
It's 10 o'clock. Can we just like take 2 minutes as it's 10 o'clock?
I just wanted to make 2 points. One is overtime isn't as bad a thing as everybody thinks, because with half of our costs being benefits are half of salary. So if you put somebody on time and a half, you're not really costing anymore. It's something we discovered. In fact, it used to be, back in the police department 20 years ago, the benefits were more than half, so it was cheaper to use overtime than hire another person. The other point I wanted to make was road narrowing. We did it on Doncaster Road. I thought it was very successful. What it was, basically, the 2 side stripes were brought in. And the road was just as wide, but the stripes brought in, so the driver thought the road was narrow. And it slowed me down, and I bicycle on that and drive on it frequently. I thought it was other people laughed at it.
Just one comment on that, though. I think the roads that we were discussing earlier, where those comments generally come from, are residential roads. And residential roads, unlike Doncaster, generally don't have striping, so that wouldn't be an option.
Okay.
But that group up on Doncaster that didn't want those.
Oh, I know. My wife included. I thought it worked, to be honest with you.
2 minutes, 2 minutes.
The third thing I wanted to say is, I think Hartford's bumps or cables are slowing traffic down, and I think they're happy with them. They can live with them. I don't know why we couldn't. At least try it. I mean, I've heard this argument against it, not just for you guys, but for the last 20 years. I'd love to try it somewhere.
Excellent, thank you.
I'm going to make it super quick.
Yes, please.
We talked earlier weeks ago or something about utilizing sources and combining resources in the town and connecting everything. And so when we talked about the who was it?
David.
Councilman Mann talked about horticulturists. I'm thinking, why can't we utilize our farm and the Agri-Science Center as far as using horticulturalists in our town and providing an opportunity not just for learning, but for utilizing what these folks have, job training and employment. And the employment wouldn't be costly, and you wouldn't have to actually pay salary and benefits.
Wonderful.
So that's just something that, John,
We can also outsource it as well, too, depending on what the application use of the horticulturist, whether it's through review or whether it's through actual work. So that's a way to get the service, get the skill set without incurring the benefit cost. But again, we'd have to know exactly the scenario to determine what the best answer is. I didn't realize our farms had horticulturists that were available for that.
Yeah, but we have potential community partners that we could utilize right here in the town and just keep that going right here in the town. I think that would be a great idea.
Excellent. 2 minutes.
2 minutes. I'm going to take less than 2 minutes. I actually wanted to say this last night, but didn't get a chance. I want to wish everyone a happy Easter and a happy Passover holiday.
Wow.
Enjoy yourself and eat a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. No, we're done.
Do we need to adjourn?
It's just,
Never actually called it to order.
thank you. Exactly, there you go. It was just a working session, so it's not a regular meeting.